All right, strap in, everyone. Today, we are going deep, really deep.
Oh, yeah.
Into the mind of David Goggins.
Intense.
And his unique perspective on what it really takes to achieve greatness.
I'm ready.
So we're dissecting a conversation he had
All right.
with neuroscientist Dr. Andrew Huberman
Oh, I know that one.
on the Huberman Lab podcast.
Yeah.
And let me tell you,
Okay.
this is not your typical self-help pep talk.
No, Goggins is
Definitely not.
something else.
Not at all.
Yeah, he really flips the script on hardship, you know?
Yeah.
Doesn't just overcome challenges, it's like he almost welcomes them.
Right. Goggins' upbringing
Yeah.
was incredibly tough. I mean, we're talking abuse,
Yeah.
learning disabilities,
Yeah.
you name it.
He had it all, huh?
It was rough, and he
That's
actually
crazy.
sees these early struggles as deliberate tests, almost. Like life was intentionally pushing him to see what he was made of.
Like tests, huh? Wow, that's pretty powerful. It resonates with a lot of the research on resilience.
Yeah.
You know, the idea that viewing obstacles as opportunities for growth really changes how you approach them.
Totally. So instead of letting these hardships define him,
Right.
Goggins uses them as fuel.
Yeah.
And that leads us to his central philosophy.
Okay.
Friction is growth.
That's a good one.
He's not about seeking comfort.
Mate?
He's about embracing the grind, the challenges.
The stuff that makes most people quit.
Yeah, exactly.
He even gives that incredible example of waking up at 2:00 a.m.
Oh, yeah.
just to double check information about a drug to help someone,
Wow.
you know.
That's serious dedication.
That's intense.
It makes you wonder, though, where's the line between pushing yourself and pushing too far?
Right. Too far.
Yeah.
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And Goggins would probably say that most of us don't even come close. You know, he believes we only tap into a tiny fraction of our potential because we just avoid discomfort at all costs.
It's true.
Well,
We live in a world of instant gratification.
right.
Maybe we've lost touch with the power of pushing past our comfort zones.
Maybe. And Goggins is saying that's exactly what separates the ordinary from the extraordinary.
I like that.
You know, true greatness requires stepping outside what feels, quote unquote, normal or comfortable, constantly challenging yourself,
Yeah.
even when it's incredibly difficult.
And he's very open
Yeah.
about the fact that his path is tough.
Uh-huh.
I mean, he even uses the word gory
Oh, wow.
to describe it.
Gory.
Yeah, and he says he intentionally simplifies his message in his books and talks
Okay.
because the full extent of his dedication is just too much for most people to handle.
Yeah, it's like, think about it this way.
Yeah.
You can read a recipe for a complex dish, right?
Yeah.
But actually cooking it is a whole different story,
Oh, that's good.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
And Goggins is living a life most people wouldn't even attempt to cook up.
That's a good analogy.
Yes.
So what drives him? Goggins describes it as being haunted
Haunted.
by the memory of his past self.
Oh, wow.
The version of himself he never wants to become again.
That's interesting, you know, because on one hand,
Yeah.
that drive is clearly powerful,
Yeah.
but it also makes you wonder about the potential downsides
Yeah.
of constantly reliving past trauma,
Mm.
you know? Is there a point where it becomes unhealthy?
It's a fine line for sure.
Yeah.
But Goggins insists that this relentless pursuit is a choice.
Okay.
One that leads to misunderstanding,
Yeah.
but also extraordinary results.
So it's a trade-off, almost.
Yeah.
He believes once you commit to this level of self-mastery, there's no going back. Your whole relationship with challenge and discomfort, it changes.
And this brings us to an interesting point. Goggins' strong opinions about social media.
Here we go.
He is not a fan,
Not a fan, huh?
to say the least.
So what does he say?
He sees it as a breeding ground for judgment.
Okay.
You know, he says it allows people who haven't faced the same level of adversity to criticize those who are striving for something extraordinary. He shared this story about how people who indulge in instant gratification tend to be the ones who judge his choices and sacrifices the most. It's almost like he feels betrayed by the very people he's trying to inspire.
That disconnect can be isolating, for sure.
Definitely.
You know, when you're pushing boundaries, you often face resistance from those who are content with the status quo.
And he seems particularly bothered by the idea that people assume he's unhappy.
Oh, really?
Because his path is so unconventional.
Just because he's doing things differently.
Yeah. He pushes back on that.
Yeah, what does he say?
Saying that his choices are about maximizing his potential,
Okay.
not about punishing himself.
Right.
He talks about, the emotional weight of putting on those metaphorical shoes every morning, knowing that people are watching and judging,
right,
often without understanding his why.
Without understanding his why. Wow.
Yeah.
That really highlights the courage it takes to forge your own path, especially when it diverges so drastically from what society deems normal.
Absolutely.
So
we're seeing this theme emerge. Goggins' belief in the power of hardship, the importance of pushing beyond our perceived limits, and his frustration with a culture that often misinterprets or undermines those efforts.
It raises the question, is Goggins' approach simply revealing the true cost of extraordinary achievement?
It's a good question.
Is there even a less intense path that could lead to that same level of greatness?
That's what we're going to try to unpack.
All right.
He doesn't shy away from the fact that he had to develop a certain hardness to survive his upbringing.
Makes sense.
He even says he had to become a character, a clown.
A clown?
To cope with his learning disabilities and feelings of inadequacy.
Oh, wow.
It's a glimpse into the lengths he had to go to just to feel like he belonged.
Just to fit in.
Yeah.
You can only imagine how isolating that must have been.
He describes opening a textbook.
Yeah.
And feeling like it was written in a foreign language.
Really?
Yeah, that feeling of being overwhelmed.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people can relate to that.
Definitely.
And instead of giving in to that feeling, he found ways to cope.
Okay.
To create a persona that masked his struggles.
Putting on a show, really.
Yeah, but Goggins is very clear
that
these coping mechanisms ultimately held him back.
They
were a temporary fix that kept him from reaching his full potential.
Wow. And that realization sparked his transformation, huh?
Yeah, he talks about having this come to Jesus moment.
Okay.
Where he finally acknowledged the extent of his challenges.
Right.
And the work required to overcome them.
It's like the classic hero's journey.
Yeah.
Facing his demons head on.
Yeah.
Acknowledging his weaknesses and committing to a path of radical self-improvement.
He created this incredibly detailed list of everything he needed to change about himself to become the person he wanted to be.
And that's where that haunting comes back into play.
Yeah.
He's constantly driven by the fear of reverting back to that old version of himself.
Like he's using that past pain as fuel.
Yeah, fuel.
Yeah.
A constant reminder of what's at stake if he lets his guard down.
So we're seeing this push and pull between Goggins' past and his present.
Right.
This constant drive to escape who he was and become something more.
It makes you think about how much our past shapes our present.
Right.
And how we can either let it define us or use it as motivation to grow.
And Goggins would say, most people choose the former.
Right.
They let their past hold them back. He's chosen a different path.
A harder path.
Yeah.
He's decided to fight. But that fight comes at a cost, and a lot of people just aren't willing to pay it.
Exactly. And that's a big part of his frustration with social media.
Oh, yeah. Social media again.
He sees it as a distraction.
Okay.
A way for people to avoid facing their own demons.
Avoiding those demons.
He talks about how frustrating it is
Yeah.
to have people criticize his methods
Right.
and question his happiness
Right.
when they haven't even attempted to understand his journey.
It goes back to that lack of empathy we talked about.
Yeah.
You know, it's easy to judge someone else's path
Right.
when you haven't walked a mile in their shoes.
And he's clearly frustrated by that lack of understanding,
Yeah.
especially from those who seem content with a more
Yeah.
comfortable, less challenging life.
He's essentially saying, if you're not willing to put in the work,
Yeah.
don't judge those who are.
He describes feeling misunderstood,
Right.
being labeled crazy,
Oh.
or unhappy simply because his path is so different from the norm.
Just because it's different.
And you can see why he resisted
Yeah.
joining social media for so long.
Right.
He knew people would judge his efforts
Totally.
without understanding the sacrifices he'd made.
Yeah, it's like he preempted the critics
Yeah.
by refusing to give them a platform.
Right.
That takes a lot of conviction.
He paints this vivid picture.
Oh, I like this.
Someone sitting on their couch,
Okay.
eating junk food,
All right.
and criticizing his dedication to fitness.
Oh, wow. That's a powerful contrast.
Yeah, it's a stark contrast that highlights the clash between comfort and growth.
It's a good one. It really gets at the heart of Goggins' message. Are you willing to trade comfort for growth? Are you willing to endure the friction to reach your full potential? And he's not sugarcoating the answer.
Nope.
The path to greatness is paved with discomfort, sacrifice, and a level of dedication most people just aren't willing to embrace.
That's deep. It's almost like he's saying, don't judge the marathon runner for their blisters if you're not even willing to put on your running shoes.
Exactly. And that brings us back to the idea of, friction is growth.
Yeah.
Goggins argues that embracing challenges, pushing past our limits, it's essential for reaching our full potential. But how do we actually put this into practice in our own lives?
Right.
His approach might seem extreme, but are there takeaways we can apply in a less intense way?
Right, because not everyone can or wants to wake up at 2 a.m. to do research.
Right, exactly.
So what would a more manageable version of friction as growth look like for the everyday person?
Well, think about it this way.
Okay.
Friction doesn't have to be this massive life-altering obstacle.
Yeah.
It can be small, deliberate acts of pushing yourself outside your comfort zone.
Okay, give me an example.
Let's say you're someone who hates public speaking.
Okay.
A small act of friction could be volunteering to present at your next team meeting.
Okay, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
It's about intentionally seeking out those moments of discomfort that help you grow.
Exactly. Or maybe you've been wanting to learn a new skill, but keep putting it off.
Yeah.
Committing to 30 minutes of practice each day, even when you don't feel like it.
Right.
That's introducing friction.
So it's about building that muscle of pushing through resistance.
Yes.
Even when it's small.
Precisely. And over time, those small acts of friction, they can lead to significant growth.
I like that.
Just like Goggins built his mental and physical strength through, years of intense training.
Right.
We can cultivate resilience and self-discipline by consistently choosing challenge over comfort.
It's like the difference between sprinting up a hill and taking the stairs.
Ooh.
Both get you to the top.
Yeah.
But they require different levels of effort.
Right.
And build different muscles.
That's a great analogy.
And this idea of growth mindset is backed by research.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Studies have shown that people who believe their abilities can be developed through dedication and hard work are more likely to achieve their goals and bounce back from setbacks.
That's the key.
So how can someone cultivate a growth mindset?
Yeah, that's the question.
It's something you're either born with or not.
Not at all. It's a skill that can be learned and practiced.
Okay.
One key is to focus on the process, not just the outcome. Instead of getting discouraged by mistakes, view them as opportunities for learning and growth.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, I'm bad at this, you could say, I'm learning and I'm getting better with each attempt.
Exactly. And another important aspect of growth mindset is embracing challenges, just like Goggins.
Okay.
Instead of avoiding difficult tasks, see them as chances to stretch yourself and develop new skills.
So instead of thinking, this is too hard, you think, this is going to push me to grow.
You got it. And celebrating your progress, no matter how small, it's crucial. Recognizing how far you've come can be a powerful motivator to keep pushing forward.
This is giving me a whole new perspective on Goggins's philosophy.
Yeah.
It's not just about extreme feats of endurance. It's about a fundamental approach to life.
It's a way of life.
Embracing challenge, pushing past comfort.
Yes.
And cultivating a belief in your own ability to grow.
Absolutely. And while Goggins's methods may be intense, the underlying principles are applicable to all of us.
Yeah.
Regardless of our goals or aspirations.
It's like he's holding up a mirror, forcing us to confront our own relationship with comfort and challenge.
Right.
Are we settling for the easy path?
Yeah.
Or are we willing to push ourselves to become the best versions of ourselves?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
And speaking of questions, I have another one about Goggins.
All right, shoot.
He talks a lot about the importance of self-mastery.
Yes, self-mastery.
But what does that actually look like in practice? Is it just about willpower and discipline?
Self-mastery is a complex concept.
Yeah.
But at its core, it's about taking control of your thoughts, emotions, and actions.
Okay.
It's about developing the ability to make conscious choices even when they're difficult.
Right.
Rather than being ruled by impulses or external pressures.
So it's about being the driver of your own life,
yes,
not just a passenger.
Exactly. And Goggins believes that this level of self-mastery is essential for achieving greatness in any area of life.
So whether you're an athlete, an artist, an entrepreneur,
It doesn't matter.
doesn't matter.
The ability to manage your inner world is crucial for navigating challenges and staying focused on your goals.
That makes a lot of sense, but how do you actually develop
Right.
self-mastery?
Yeah.
Goggins seems to have this almost superhuman level of discipline.
It's intense.
Is that something you can learn, or are some people just wired differently?
Well, remember, Goggins wasn't born with this level of discipline.
Right.
It was something he cultivated through years of intense training, both physical and mental. He talks about developing a callous mind,
Okay.
a mental toughness that allows him to push through pain, fatigue, and self-doubt.
Okay, so it's not about being born with a special gene.
Right.
It's about building that mental fortitude through practice.
Exactly. And while most of us probably don't need to reach Goggins' level of intensity,
Right.
there are certain practices we can adopt
Okay.
to strengthen our self-discipline.
Like what?
Well, one key is setting clear goals
Okay.
and breaking them down into smaller, manageable steps.
Right.
This helps to avoid feeling overwhelmed,
Makes sense.
and it makes the journey feel less daunting.
So instead of saying, I want to run a marathon,
Right.
you start by saying, I'm going to run for 30 minutes today.
Precisely. And another important aspect of self-mastery is developing a consistent routine. This could involve things like waking up at the same time each day,
Right.
scheduling dedicated time for work and exercise, and limiting distractions.
So it's about creating structure and accountability for yourself.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of mindfulness.
Okay.
Paying attention to your thoughts and emotions without judgment,
Mm-hmm.
it can help you identify patterns that might be sabotaging your efforts.
So if you notice yourself constantly making excuses
Right.
or procrastinating, you can start to address those behaviors
Yes.
and develop healthier habits.
Exactly. And remember, self-mastery isn't about being perfect.
Right.
It's about progress.
Okay.
There will be setbacks and challenges along the way.
Yeah, that's life.
But the key is to keep learning from your experiences and refining your approach.
It sounds like a lifelong journey, not a destination.
Exactly. And just like any journey, it requires patience, persistence, and a willingness to keep moving forward even when the going gets tough.
So while Goggins' path may seem extreme, the underlying principles are universally applicable.
Yes, it's about embracing challenge, pushing past comfort zones,
Yeah.
and cultivating the mental and emotional tools
Right.
necessary to achieve our goals.
And perhaps, most importantly,
Yes,
it's about recognizing that we all have the capacity for greatness within us.
we do.
It might be buried beneath layers of self-doubt, fear, and limiting beliefs, but it's there, waiting to be unearthed.
It's there.
It's almost like Goggins is a modern-day explorer,
I feel like that.
venturing into the uncharted territories of the human mind and showing us what's possible when we dare to push beyond our perceived limits.
And while his methods may not be for everyone, his message is clear. Greatness isn't something that's bestowed upon us. It's something we earn through relentless effort, self-awareness, and a willingness to embrace the discomfort
Right.
that inevitably accompanies growth.
It's a powerful message for sure.
It is.
And one that's sure to resonate with anyone who's ever felt stuck, unfulfilled, or simply curious about their own untapped potential.
And speaking of untapped potential,
Oh, here we go.
let's talk about Goggins' views on social media.
Okay.
This is where things get really interesting.
So we've talked about how Goggins sees social media as this breeding ground for judgment and negativity.
Right, he even calls it a cesspool at one point.
Yeah, pretty harsh.
It is, and he's especially critical of what he sees as this culture of instant gratification on social media. This idea that you can achieve success and fulfillment with minimal effort.
Right, and he feels it clashes
Oh, yeah.
directly with his philosophy of hard work and dedication. He almost sees it as a betrayal, right?
Definitely. Like, people are just sitting there
Yeah.
scrolling through these perfectly curated lives, judging his choices without understanding the sacrifices he's made.
It's like he's saying you can't appreciate the view from the mountaintop if you're not willing to climb the mountain.
Exactly. He shares that really striking image of someone sitting on their couch, indulging in junk food, and criticizing his dedication to fitness.
It's a powerful contrast.
It is.
But is it fair to say that everyone on social media is just seeking instant gratification?
That's a good point.
I mean, there are a lot of people using these platforms to share positive messages, connect with others, even build businesses.
You're right. Goggins' views on social media are definitely on the extreme end.
Yeah.
It's important to remember that These platforms can be used in many different ways.
And he does acknowledge
Yeah.
that social media can be a tool for connection and even inspiration.
Right.
But for him, the negatives outweigh the positives.
Yeah, he talks about how difficult it is to convey
Yeah.
the true extent of his dedication and the challenges he's faced
Right.
through the lens of social media.
He feels like it's impossible to capture the nuance and complexity of his journey in a world of sound bites and filtered photos.
A world of, like, highlight reels, you know?
So he sees it as a simplification of reality, almost a distortion of the truth.
He uses the word superficial a lot when describing social media.
Right.
He feels like it promotes a version of reality that's heavily curated.
Right.
And often lacks depth.
And this ties back into his belief that true greatness requires a level of effort and sacrifice that most people just aren't willing to embrace.
Exactly. He feels like social media allows people to bypass the hard work and present a version of themselves that's not entirely authentic.
Yeah.
And that's what frustrates him, the disconnect between the image and the reality.
He talks about this feeling of being misunderstood, of having his motivations questioned simply because he's chosen a path that's less conventional.
It's interesting because on one hand, he seems to reject social media entirely.
Right.
But on the other hand, he's clearly aware of its power and the potential for judgment it holds.
It's almost like he's wrestling with this internal conflict between his desire to stay true to himself and his awareness of how his message is being perceived by the outside world.
That makes sense. It's like he wants to share his story and inspire others.
Yeah.
But he's also wary of the potential for misinterpretation and criticism that comes with putting yourself out there in such a public way.
So how do we reconcile
good question.
these seemingly contradictory views?
Right.
On one hand, we have Goggins rejecting social media as this superficial distraction. And on the other hand, we have him using platforms like Instagram to connect with his followers and share his message.
I think it comes down to intention and awareness.
Okay.
Social media can be a powerful tool for good or bad.
Right.
Depending on how it's used.
So it's about being mindful of the content you consume and the messages you put out into the world.
Exactly. And it's also about recognizing that social media is just one small part of a much larger picture.
Yeah.
You know, it's important to cultivate a sense of perspective and not let the virtual world overshadow the real world.
That's a great reminder. So as we wrap up this deep dive into David Goggins' philosophy, what are some key takeaways for our listeners?
Well, Goggins' message is ultimately about pushing beyond our perceived limits and embracing the challenges that lead to growth.
Right.
He believes that true greatness requires a level of dedication, discipline, and self-awareness.
Yeah.
That most people just aren't willing to cultivate.
He's challenging us to question our relationship with comfort.
For sure.
And to consider whether we're settling for a life of mediocrity or striving for something more.
And while his approach might seem extreme, the underlying principles are universally applicable.
Yeah.
We can all benefit from introducing more friction into our lives.
Right.
Whether that means tackling a challenging project at work, learning a new skill, or simply pushing ourselves outside our comfort zones in small but meaningful ways.
He's reminding us that we all have the potential for greatness within us.
We do.
It might be buried beneath layers of fear, self-doubt, and limiting beliefs, but it's there waiting to be unearthed.
Absolutely.
And while social media can be a powerful tool for connection and inspiration, it's important to use it mindfully.
Yes.
And not let it distort our perception of reality.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Ultimately, Goggins' message is a call to action.
It is?
He's urging us to stop making excuses, to step out of our comfort zones, and to embrace the challenges that will ultimately lead us to become the best versions of ourselves.
And while his path might not be for everyone, his unwavering belief in the power of the human spirit is something we can all learn from.
So the next time you find yourself hesitating, making excuses, or settling for less than you're capable of, remember David Goggins and his unwavering belief in the transformative power of friction. What will you choose, comfort or growth?